Hey everyone, this is a piece by Sebastian Voigt. It's titled Anti-Semitic, Anti-Zionism Within the German Left. It says here in a footnote that he works at the Simon-Dubnow-Institut for Jewish History and Culture at the University of Leipzig. I wish to thank Ursula Duba for helping me with the subtleties of the English language. The German Wikipedia says Sebastian Voigt is a German historian. Let's see what it has to say. Sebastian Voigt grew up in Marbach am Neckar. His father is the historian Johannes H. Voigt. Sebastian Voigt studied history, German studies, philosophy, and education from 2000 to 2007 at the Albert-Ludwigs-University in Freiburg and Breisgau. Let me see if I'm pronouncing this dude's name right.
Sebastian Voigt.
Voigt? Yeah.
Voigt.
Voigt. Okay. Sebastian Voigt. That's how you actually say his name. Where am I? Sebastian Voigt grew up in Marbach am Neckar. His father is Johannes H. Voigt. Sebastian Voigt studied history, German studies, philosophy and education from 2000 to 2007 at Albert-Ludwigs-University in Freiburg in Breisgau, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and the University of Leipzig. In 2006, Sebastian Voigt obtained a Magister Artium, and in 2007, Sebastian Voigt passed the first state examination for secondary school teaching. During Sebastian Voigt's studies, he received scholarships from the German Academic Scholarship Foundation, the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation, and the Fulbright Commission. Between 2003 and 2013, Sebastian Voigt worked at the Simon-Dubnow-Institut for Jewish History and Culture in Leipzig. In 2008, Voigt was a co-founder of the federal working group Shalom in the Linksjugend. In 2009, Sebastian Voigt received a doctoral scholarship from the Hans Buchler Foundation, and in 2013, he received his doctorate from the University of Leipzig with a thesis on the memory and history of the left-wing Jewish activist in post-war France. The publication was published in 2015 under the title The Jewish May 68, Pierre Goldman, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, and André Glucksmann in post-war France, and was widely received in both the daily press and specialist journals. In an interview, Daniel Cohn-Bendit commented positively on Voigt's idea that his Jewish origins had been significant in the 1968 movement, even if it played no subjective role for him at the time. One second. Since 2013, Voigt has been working as a research assistant at the Institute for Contemporary History, Munich, Berlin, where Sebastian Voigt, how do you say it again? Voigt? Vogt? At the Institute for Contemporary History, Munich, Berlin, Voigt coordinates the graduate school, quote, social consequences of the change in work in the second half of the 20th century, end quote. Sebastian Voigt is also editor of the review journal Zeitpunkte and of the IFZ series Zeitgeschichte im Gespräch. Voigt is also editor of the journal Labor Studies in Working Class History. Sebastian Voigt has often acted as a reviewer, for example, for foundations such as the Ernst Ludwig Ehrlich Studienwerk and for journals including Francia. From 2013 to 2015, Sebastian Voigt was a lecturer at the chair of contemporary history at the University of Leipzig. Since 2015, Sebastian Voigt has been a fellow at the Institute for Social Movements and a lecturer at the Ruhr University Bochum. Sebastian Voigt is also a lecturer at the University of the Federal Armed Forces, Munich. Sebastian Voigt has written 3 monographs, edited several books, and published numerous essays. Sebastian Voigt's last book on the history of anti-Semitism received a lot of media attention. Sebastian Voigt was interviewed by numerous radio stations, including Deutschlandfunk, RBB, and Austrian Radio. Sebastian Voigt is co-founder and editor of the series, quote, Relations, Essays on the Present, end quote, which has been published by Neophelis Verlag since 2014. Sebastian Voigt's research interests include the history of trade unions and the labor movement, anti-Semitism, communism and anti-communism, and the history of the left. Most recently, Sebastian Voigt gave a lecture and a webinar at the University of Sussex on the relationship of the left to anti-Semitism. Sebastian Voigt has also published numerous journalistic articles and commentaries, including in the TAZ, the Jungle World, Tagesspiegel, and the Jerusalem Post. Sebastian Voigt was also interviewed by major media outlets on various topics, including by Deutschlandfunk on the death of André Glucksmann and by the ZDF on Willy Brandt's government declaration in 1969 and the state of the SPD today. Sebastian Voigt was a member of the commission, quote, Cultures of Remembrance of Social Democracy, end quote, set up by the German Trade Union Confederation. Since 2021, Sebastian Voigt has been on the advisory board of the Reichspräsident Friedrich Ebert Memorial Foundation. Controversy section. Individual members of the left-wing parliamentary group in the Bundestag and parts of its party base have strongly criticized Israel's policy on Palestine. In 2011, Sebastian Voigt and the political scientist Samuel Salzborn described anti-Israel and anti-Semitic tendencies in the party in an essay. The essay, first published in the Frankfurter Rundschau, later appeared in a slightly revised form in the Zeitschrift für Politik. The essay was the occasion for a current affairs debate in the Bundestag, requested by the CDU, CSU, and FDP. Some members of the party leadership were critical of the tendencies described, others denied them. In an essay also published in the Zeitschrift für Politik, sociologist Peter Ulrich and political scientist Alban Werner criticized the article by Sebastian Voigt and Samuel Salzborn as, quote, methodologically inadequate and, quote, inconsistent, end quote. According to Ulrich and Werner, the authors were selective in their analysis of the current state of research and did not sufficiently take into account different possible interpretations of the data. Sebastian Voigt's works include Hatred of Jews, A Story Without End, published in 2023. The Jewish May 68, Pierre Goldman, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, and André Glucksmann in Post-War France, published in 2015. The Dialectic of Unity and Difference, On the Origin and Validity of the Principle of Pluralism in the United States of America, published in 2007. As editor with Wiebke Friedrich and Christoph Schwarz, he edited Labor Unions in the Democratic Process. He edited with Heinz Zunker, Workers' Movement, Nation, Globalization, Inventory of an Old Debate, in 2014. Jewish and Non-Jewish Spaces in the Urban Context. He edited with Bernd Heil and Edgar Weich. Ernest Jouy, On the Relevance of a Passionate Educator. And he edited in 2021, Since the Boom, Continuity and Change in the Western Industrialized World After 1970. Okay, so here we are. Section 1, Introduction. This essay analyzes the anti-Semitic anti-Zionism of the radical left in Germany and focuses mainly on the far-left party Die Linke. I know what Die Linke is, but I'll just read the description of it. Die Linke translates as the left, commonly referred to as the Left Party, is a democratic socialist political party in Germany. Die Linke was founded in 2007 as the result of the merger of the Party of Democratic Socialism, PDS, and Labor and Social Justice, the electoral alternative. Through the PDS, the party is the direct descendant of the Marxist-Leninist ruling party of former East Germany, the Socialist Unity Party of Germany, SED. Since October 2024, the left's co-chairpersons have been Ines Schwertner and Jan van Aken. The party holds 28 seats out of 236 in the Bundestag, the federal legislature of Germany, having won 4.9% of votes cast in the 2021 German federal election. Its parliamentary group is the second smallest of 7 in the Bundestag and is headed by parliamentary co-leaders Heidi Reicheneck and Sören Pellmann. Die Linke is represented in 8 of Germany's 16 state legislatures, including all 5 of the eastern states. As of 2021, the party participates in governments in the states of Bremen, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern as a junior partner, as well as in Thuringia, where Die Linke leads a coalition with the Social Democratic Party and the Greens, headed by Minister-President Bodo Ramelov. Die Linke is a founding member of the Party of the European Left and is the third largest party in the European United Left Nordic Green Left group in the European Parliament. In December 2022, the left had 540,214 registered members, making Die Linke the 6th largest party in Germany by membership. This decreased further to 50,251 members in December 2023. Die Linke promotes left-wing populism, anti-fascism, and anti-militarism, and is neutral on European integration. In late 2023, prominent member Sarah Wagenknecht and several supporters split from the party and formed Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, resulting in the dissolution of the left's official faction in the Bundestag. Okay. Back to the text. For several years, Die Linke has played an increasingly large role within the German political spectrum. The party was founded in 2007 as a result of the fusion of 2 other parties, the successor of the East German Communist Party, SED, and the Election Alternative for Social Justice, WASG, a group of disgruntled Social Democrats and labor unionists who had split from the moderate left-wing Social Democratic Party. Currently, Die Linke is a hodgepodge of different, sometimes contradictory political ideologies, ranging from orthodox Stalinists to moderate reformers. The evolution and composition of Die Linke is thus hard to predict. Still, one thing is certain: Die Linke has become a major player in German politics and has a strong influence on the European left in general. In Germany's last parliamentary elections in 2019, it gained 12% of the vote. In addition, it is the fourth strongest party in the Bundestag, Germany's federal parliament. Several of its members hold seats in the European Parliament. At the present, it is the most important party in the European left, an association of leftist parties in the European Union. Die Linke is represented in 13 of Germany's 16 state parliaments and is part of the growing coalition in 2 states, including Berlin. In elections held during the past 2 years, Die Linke increased Die Linke's share of the vote to 28% in the eastern states of Germany, former GDR, and to an impressive 20% in some western parts of Germany. This information is crucial to understanding the relevance of the following analysis. Section 2. Overview of key developments within the German left since reunification. The emergence of a leftist pro-Israel position. Recently, a small but audible segment of the German left has started to consider criticism of anti-Semitism and equally of anti-Zionism and anti-Americanism as central to the renewal of a progressive view of modern society. This includes support of Israel, which is in direct opposition to the position of the mainstream left. Footnote: on this trend, see the recent article by Jeffrey Herf titled Fresh Air in Central Europe, published in New Republic. The article is available online. A good summary of the historical genesis of this pro-Israel left position can be found in an interview with the Austrian researcher and Stop the Bomb activist Stefan Grigat, Communism, Anti-German Criticism, and Israel, an interview with Stefan Grigat by Jens Mazera. First published in Israel Nachrichten, the German daily newspaper in Tel Aviv, in 2004, published in English. End footnote. Stefan Grigat has multiple pieces on this channel. He also wrote the overview for Johannes Agnoli in the Sage Handbook of Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. End footnote. The emergence of a pro-Israel left is connected to developments in German society since reunification in 1990. The debate within the left should be regarded as a result of the profound political changes that took place at this time. Reunification was seen by many leftists as a reversal of the outcome of the Second World War. The reunification of Germany coincided with a wave of pogroms and racist attacks against foreigners, asylum seekers, and Jews. This led to fears of a, quote, Fourth Reich and the reemergence of German imperialism. Where am I? In retrospect, these fears were completely unfounded. Nevertheless, they were a direct consequence of a decisive rupture in German and European history. The decline of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War caused the worldview of many leftists to collapse, even if they had never supported Soviet-style communism. The apparent victory of capitalism and of liberal democracies turned the established ideology of leftist thinking on its head and caused a fundamental disorientation. At the time, a debate about the history of the left and the left's mistakes slowly started to emerge, and a small segment of the German left began to deal self-critically with anti-Zionism, anti-imperialism, and its relationship with the State of Israel. Many leftist magazines even supported the Second Gulf War in 1990-91. Footnote. The most important leftist magazine at this time was and still is Konkret, which featured a long and difficult debate about the Second Gulf War. Some authors supported the war, which led to a loss of half the readership. There was also an extensive debate in the left in general. See Klaus Schoenberger and Klaus Kussler. Something in German. I'm not going to read that because I can't read German. And if you don't know, the Second Gulf War was the war in Iraq. That's how I'm always hear it referred to in the United States. More members of the left supported the war against the Taliban after 9/11, and some unexpectedly supported the overthrow of Saddam Hussein's dictatorship in Iraq in 2003. Footnote. The most important book on this discussion is Jihad und Judenhass by Matthias Kunzel. The book was also translated into English. See Matthias Kunzel, Jihad and Jew Hatred, Islamism, Nazism, and the Roots of 9/11. End footnote. New section. Section 3. Bach Shalom Group. And see if anything comes up for the Bach Shalom, and it's BAK, the BAC Shalom Group. Back to the text. Can't find anything for Bach Shalom. That's like a summary of what they are. These changes within left-leaning groups did not fundamentally affect Die Linke until 2007, when a group called BAK Shalom was founded with the purpose of exposing and combating anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Americanism, and what was described as regressive anti-capitalism within Die Linke. See the English version of the Declaration of Principles by BAK Shalom, available at, I don't know why I said available at, like I'm going to read the URL. Can't find anything. Anyway. End footnote. Back to the text. Although I have never been a member of Die Linke, I have been in touch with many of its members, In addition, I once received a scholarship from the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation, which is closely linked to Die Linke. Footnote. See the English version of the homepage of the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation. End footnote. I was myself a founding member of Bach Shalom and have written articles and given talks about anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism. As a result, I was accused of being an agent of imperialism and called a Zionist traitor and neoliberal racist. Nevertheless, BAK Shalom managed to make this discussion, which had been going on for several years, a part of the overall framework of Die Linke. BAK Shalom received considerable media attention, and for some time I was so optimistic that I believed it might be possible to substantially influence the political discourse within Die Linke. Footnote. Members of BAK Shalom have published several articles in important newspapers. See Sebastian Voigt and Benjamin Kruger, Let the Left Go Forward, published in the Jerusalem Post. End footnote. Unfortunately, this was not to be. I was obviously too optimistic or may have been too naive, as I was often told from the very outset. Footnote. A discussion between Jan Gerber and this author was published in the German leftist weekly Jungle World. End footnote. New section. The core ideology of Die Linke. The predominant fundamentalist ideology of Die Linke is anti-imperialist, adamantly opposed to the existence of Israel, and both overtly and covertly anti-Semitic. The most recent evidence of this ideology was revealed during the confrontation on the Mavi Marmara on the 31st of May 2010, when a commando of the Israeli Defense Forces stormed the ship after the captain refused to comply with the instructions of the Israeli Navy. The Mavi Marmara is a Comoros-flagged passenger ship which was formerly owned and operated by IDO Istanbul Fast Ferries Co. Inc. on the line Saray-Burnu, Istanbul, Marmara Island, Avsa Island in the Sea of Marmara. Built on the Golden Gate shipyard by Turkish Shipbuilding Co. in 1994, the Mavi Marmara is best known for its participation in the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and the deadly confrontation that took place on it during the Gaza Flotilla raid. Wikipedia says the Gaza Freedom Flotilla raid was a small fleet of ships organized in 2010 by the Free Gaza Movement and the Turkish Foundation for Human Rights and Freedoms and Humanitarian Relief, carrying humanitarian aid and construction materials with the intention of breaking the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. In typical circumstances, aid is first brought to Israel to be inspected and then transferred to Gaza. On the 31st of May 2010, Israeli forces boarded the ships in a raid from speedboats and helicopters. Following resistance on one of the boats, 9 activists were killed by Israeli forces. Widespread international condemnation of and reaction to the raid followed. Israel-Turkey relations were strained, and Israel subsequently eased its blockade on the Gaza Strip. Well, my internet's being a piece of shit, of course. So I'll have to press on. Back to the text. The most recent evidence of this ideology was revealed during the confrontation on the Mavi Marmara, when a commando of the Israeli Defense Forces stormed the ship after the captain refused to comply with the instructions of the Israeli Navy. 9 people were killed in the ensuing struggle. 2 current and 1 former member of the German Bundestag were on board the Mavi Marmara. All are members of Die Linke: Norman Peisch, Annette Groth, and Inge Huger. They were arrested by the Israeli army but were released shortly thereafter. It is noteworthy to look at what happened when they returned to Germany. They were not taken to task by Die Linke for cooperating with an organization with suspected terrorist links. Neither did they have to justify their support for radical Islamists who are well known to be reactionary to the very core and blatantly trample on the most basic human rights, especially women's rights. Instead, the chairwoman of Die Linke, Gesine Lutsch, expressed pride in their so-called mission. Footnote. See for the newspaper article by Miriam Holstein and Thomas Vistum. And footnote. The only voice from within Die Linke that criticized the actions of her colleagues was Petra Pau, vice president of the German parliament. Petra Pau subsequently faced a storm of criticism from within Die Linke. Footnote. Petra Pau wrote an open letter to the Jewish community in Bremen and criticized the members of Die Linke who were on board the ship. Okay, so I got some internet now, and I'm going to look up some of these names. First, Wikipedia says for the Gaza Flotilla Raid. The Gaza Flotilla Raid was a military operation by Israel against 6 civilian ships of the, quote, Gaza Freedom Flotilla, end quote, on the 31st of May 2010 in international waters in the Mediterranean Sea. 9 of the flotilla passengers were killed during the raid, with 30 wounded, including one who later died of his wounds. 10 Israeli soldiers were wounded, 1 seriously. The exact sequence of events is contested, in part due to the IDF's confiscation of the passengers' photographic evidence. The flotilla, organized by the Free Gaza movement and the Turkish Foundation for Human Rights and Freedoms and Humanitarian Relief, IHH, was carrying humanitarian aid and construction materials intending to break the Israeli naval blockade of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Navy warned the flotilla via radio to stop approaching the naval blockade and to change course to the port of Ashdod. The request was denied, and on the 31st of May 2010, Israeli Shayetet 13 naval commandos boarded the ship in international waters from speedboats and helicopters. Aboard the Turkish ship MV Mavi Marmara, the Israeli Navy faced resistance from about 40 of the 590 passengers, including IHH activists who were said to be armed with iron bars and knives. During the struggle, 9 activists were killed, including 8 Turkish nationals and 1 Turkish American, and many were wounded. On the 23rd of May 2014, a 10th member of the flotilla died in hospital after being in a coma for 4 years. 10 of the commandos were also wounded, one of them seriously. According to a UN report, all activist deaths were caused by gunshots, and the, quote, circumstances of the killing of at least 6 of the passengers were in a manner consistent with an extra-legal, arbitrary, and summary execution, end quote. The 5 other ships in the flotilla employed passive resistance, which was suppressed without major incident. According to the UN report, several of the passengers were injured and the leg of one was fractured. The ships were towed to Israel. Some passengers were deported immediately, while about 600 were detained after they refused to sign deportation orders. A few of them were slated for prosecution. After international criticism, all of the detained activists were deported. The raid drew widespread condemnation internationally and resulted in a deterioration of Israel-Turkey relations. Israel subsequently eased its blockade on the Gaza Strip. All surviving activists were freed, though only the Turkish and Greek ships were returned. Israel confiscated and continued to hold the other ships, as well as most of the property, including all media recordings of over 700 passengers as of June 2010. There were several probes into the incident. A UNHRC report in September 2010 into the incident deemed the blockade illegal and stated that Israel's actions were, quote, disproportionate and, quote, betrayed an unacceptable level of brutality, end quote, with evidence of, quote, willful killing, end quote. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced a parallel probe in 2010 by a 4-member panel headed by Jeffrey Palmer. The Palmer report was published on the 2nd of September 2011 after being delayed, reportedly to allow Israel and Turkey to continue reconciliation talks. The report found the Israeli naval blockade of Gaza was legal, and that there were, quote, serious questions about the conduct, true nature, and objectives of the flotilla organizers, particularly IHH, end quote. The report also found the degree of force used against the Mavi Marmara was, quote, excessive and unreasonable, end quote, and that the way Israel treated detained crew members violated international human rights law. Israel has offered Turkey $20 million in compensation for the raid on the 22nd of March 2013 in a half-hour telephone exchange between Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The former apologized on behalf of his nation. Erdogan accepted the apology and both agreed to enter into further discussions. On the 29th of June 2016, the agreement was finalized and approved by the Israeli government. Norman Paisch, born 1938, is a retired German professor and member of the political party Die Linke. It says, according to journalist, this is all from Wikipedia, Jan Philipp Hein, Paisch frequently puts Israel near state terrorism and racism, or regarding anti-Israel terrorism as mere resistance. Paisch, however, denied the article's claims of him belittling Palestinian violence. Paisch was among the 7 PDS MPs who abstained from voting on the Anti-Semitism declaration, which was made on the occasion of the 70th Kristallnacht anniversary. Their actions drew criticism from the Union and Green Bundestag fractions. The 11 MPs explained that, while the concerns are justified, the declaration would discredit any criticism on American and Israeli war policies as an act of anti-Semitism. One second. Together with Inga Huger and Annette Groth, Paisch accompanied the International Relief Convoy to the Gaza Strip on May 2010. After the raid on the convoy, Paisch, it's probably, I'm starting to say, the CH is probably like an H sound. Quote, The Israeli government justifies the raid because they were attacked. This is absolutely not the case. This is not an act of self-defense. We had not prepared in any way to fight. We didn't even consider it. No violence, no resistance, because we knew very well that we would have absolutely no chance against soldiers like this. This is an attack in international waters on a peaceful mission. This was a clear act of piracy, end quote. Norman Pech. Annette Groth was born May 1954 in Bielefeld and is a German politician from Baden-Württemberg. And the section for the Gaza flotilla said, at the end of May 2010, together with Inge Huger and Norman Pech, Annette Groth accompanied an international convoy from Free Gaza movement. Quote, it was like war. They had guns, taser weapons, some type of tear gas and other weaponry. Compared to 2.5 wooden sticks we had between us, to talk of self-defense is ridiculous, end quote. Groth's comments stand in contrast to the United Nations official report on the incident, the so-called Palmer Report, while stating that, quote, the loss of life and injuries resulting from the use of force by Israeli forces during the takeover of the Mavi Marmara was unacceptable, end quote. The report observed that the Israeli Defense Forces met, quote, organized and violent resistance from a group of passengers, end quote. Additionally, the Palmer Report, quote, seriously questions the true nature and objectives of the flotilla organizers, end quote. The report concluded that, quote, to deliberately seek to breach a blockade in a convoy with a large number of passengers is, in view of the panel, a dangerous and reckless act, end quote. On the 1st of June 2010, Annette Groth spoke at a protest outside the Foreign Ministry in Berlin. And a section that says of the Wikipedia page says statements deemed anti-Semitic. In 2015, at an evangelical church day in Stuttgart, Groth made the following remarks on the Gaza Strip. Quote, the water supply in Gaza was destroyed in a very targeted manner, and I have to say that this is also against international law. You can't do that, so I mean the basis of life in Gaza is almost actually no longer there. Ultimately, Israel is harming itself because of all the chemicals. Tons, metric tons, over thousands of tons are now gradually coming into the sea. This is the Mediterranean. It goes on, and there is toxic material in there. You know that too. Yes, well, it is extremely dangerous for everyone else, end quote. Commentators have observed several problems with Groth's assertion. The statement is factually incorrect. It mirrors long-standing anti-Semitic tropes that Jews poison wells. Gesine Lütsch is a German politician of the left-wing party Die Linke. In 2010, with Klaus Ernst, Gesine Lütsch was elected president of the party. It says that Lütsch has been criticized for suggesting that former employees of the Stasi, which is the secret police of the GDR, the secret police of former East German states, should be allowed to serve in parliaments and governments. The leader of the Alliance 90/Greens, Claudia Roth, claimed that Gesine Lütsch wants to, quote, sweep the past under the carpet, end quote. Lütsch's local party group in Berlin-Lichtenberg has invited former Stasi employees and informers to speak on several occasions with her support. For instance, Erich Mielke's immediate deputy, Werner Grossmann, was invited as a speaker. Green member of Parliament Wolfgang Wieland criticized Gesine Lutsch for appearing as a speaker before a revisionist association. The Initiative Gemeinschaft zum Schutz der Sozialrechte, the Community Initiative for the Protection of the Social Rights. Gesine Lutsch was married to Ronald Lutsch, who lived from 1931 to 2018, who in 2010 was revealed to have been an informer for the Stasi. Wikipedia says Petra Pau, born 9th of August 1963, is a German politician of Die Linke. Petra Pau has been a member of the Bundestag since 1998. Since 2006, she has also served as one of the vice presidents of the Bundestag, being the first member of her party to hold this office. Pau belongs to the reform-oriented wing of her party, actively supporting parliamentary representative democracy. All right, back to the text. The above-mentioned three politicians referred to themselves as, quote, survivors of the Israeli massacre, end quote, and went on a propaganda tour of various German cities in order to tell the story of their heroism firsthand. During one of these events, Norman Pech, a former member of parliament and retired professor of law, went so far as to suggest that the next Gaza Freedom Flotilla should be accompanied by the German maritime forces that patrol the Lebanese border. If this request were to be carried out, it would amount to using the German military against Israel. The audience roared loudly in response to this suggestion, and one member of the audience was so fired up that he expressed his desire to hit the fascist state of Israel next time. Norman Pech called that, quote, an idea, end quote. Footnote. This, quote, event, end quote, was recorded by radio journalists of the independent station Freies Sender Kombinat in Hamburg. Afterwards, they produced a 60-minute radio program entitled Wie antisemitisch ist die Linkspartei? How anti-Semitic is the Left Party? The program can be listened to online. End footnote. It needs to be emphasized that this scandalous response was made by a former member of the German parliament and former foreign policy expert of a legitimate German party that is represented in the Bundestag. Alas, statements like these are merely the culmination of a process that has been in the work for some time. In 2006, for example, Wolfgang Gerke, a member of the Bundestag for Die Linke, wanted to invite representatives of Hamas to a conference. According to German Wikipedia, Wolfgang Gerke, born 1943, is a German politician of the DKP, then PDS, then Die Linke. From 1981 to 1989, Wolfgang Gerke was chairman of the Hamburg DKP. From 1991 to 1993, Wolfgang Gerke was federal manager of the PDS, and from 1993 to 1998, deputy PDS federal chairman. Since October 2002, Gerke has been a member of the PDS Party Executive Committee, and from June 2000 to June 2012, a member of the Party Executive Committee of Die Linke. From 1998 to 2002, he was a member of the German Bundestag and deputy chairman of the PDS parliamentary group. From 2004 to 2005, Wolfgang Gerke was a member of the Brandenburg State Parliament, then a member of the Bundestag until 2017. Back to the text. However, Hamas were denied entry visas to Germany. Many members of Die Linke regard Hamas as the legitimate, democratically elected government of the Palestinians. The organization's ideology and highly undemocratic structure does not raise a red flag within Die Linke, which conveniently ignores the virulent anti-Semitism of Hamas. During the Lebanon War in 2006, Christina Buchholz, a hardcore member of Die Linke and currently a member of the Bundestag, referred to Israel and the United States as warmongering countries, adding, quote, Hezbollah represents, along with the peace movement in Israel and the international anti-war movement, the opposite side in the conflict. This is also the side that I am on, end quote. Buchholz. Christina Buchholz, born 1971, is a German politician for Die Linke and was a member of the Bundestag from 2009 to 2001. Christina Buchholz was the parliamentary group's spokesperson for religious policy, as well as a member of the Defense Committee and deputy member of the Human Rights Committee. From 2007 to 2021 and since 2022, Christina Buchholz was and is active in the party executive of Die Linke with a focus on anti-fascism and anti-racism. Back to the text. Buchholz then went on to describe the, quote, demonization, end quote, of Hezbollah as one of the most egregious prejudices expressed by the media during the war. For a politician of the left to say that she sides with a terrorist organization such as Hezbollah is almost beyond belief, but it also constitutes irrefutable proof of a very crucial shift in leftist politics and ideology. New section, section 5. The underlying reasons for the left's hatred of Israel. There are several explanations for the left's bottomless hatred of Israel. One key factor is anti-imperialism, which is informed by a dichotomous view of the world. According to this worldview, the world and society are split into two opposing groups. One group wants peace and the other group wants to pursue imperialism. In other words, there is an exploiting first world and an exploited third world. This is as simplistic a concept of the complexity of modern societies as one could possibly imagine. It inevitably leads to the personification of social relations, which makes it easy to pinpoint the persons responsible for exploitation and oppression. This encourages all those who refuse to use knowledge and rationality to understand the complex world we live in to entertain wild conspiracy theories. On the basis of old, deeply entrenched prejudices, Jews are perceived as those pulling the strings, while Israel is seen as the spearhead of Western imperialism in the Middle East, and as an artificial state that is a foreign object in the organic body of Arab societies. Footnote. Moish Pistone has written extensively about anti-Semitism and the relation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. See his famous essay, Anti-Semitism and National Socialism, Notes on the German Reaction to Holocaust. See also the recent interview with Pistone by Martin Thomas, available at the Workers' Liberty website. End footnote. New section, section 6, Orthodox Communist Ideology. The anti-Israel ideology of Die Linke has two roots. The first one is the communist ideology and politics of the German Democratic Republic, GDR. The GDR was not an anti-Semitic country per se, although the GDR mounted several anti-Zionist campaigns that made ample use of anti-Semitic stereotypes. The so-called Neckar trial in the mid-1950s. Sorry. Paul Neckar. Sorry, I'm looking for Wikipedia. Sorry. Let me reread the sentence. The so-called Neckar trial in the mid-1950s, during which Paul Neckar and other leading members of the Communist Party were convicted of having collaborated with Israel and the United States, the imperialistic arch-enemies, is but one example. Wikipedia says Paul Neckar lived from 1894 to 1969. Paul Neckar was member of the Germany's Communist Party, KPD, Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, who later became a politician and top official of East Germany's ruling SED, Socialist Unity Party of Germany. Neckar featured for several years in the show trial culture of the time, placed under a lengthy investigation process that formally began in 1950 and jailed for 8 years as a spy in 1955. Released less than a year later, Paul Neckar appeared as a reluctant witness against his friend Walter Janka at another show trial in 1957. End footnote, not end footnote, back to the text. The GDR considered itself to be an anti-fascist state and engaged in the self-righteous deception of having eliminated the roots of fascism by nationalizing heavy industry and expropriating the reactionary Prussian landowners. Footnote, see the monumental work by Jeffrey Herf, Divided Memory, the Nazi Past and the Two Germanys. End footnote. The hegemonic notion of fascism in the GDR stemmed from the orthodox communist view expressed by Georgy Dimitrov in the mid-1930s. Fascism in power, Dimitrov said, is, quote, the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital, end quote. Georgy Dimitrov. If fascism is regarded as the supreme form of capitalistic dictatorship, the anti-Semitic ideology has to be put on the back burner. Anti-Semitism was not recognized as the core of Nazi ideology, but as a means of distraction employed by the ruling class to divide the proletariat. Auschwitz and the annihilation of the European Jews was not recognized as a rupture in civilization itself, as Dan Dinner has pointed out. Or Dan Diner. Dan Diner, or Denner, I don't know how to say his name, D-I-N-E-R. Born 1946, a German-Israeli historian and political writer. Diner is Professor Emeritus of modern history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and former director from 1999 to 2014 of the Simon-Dubnow-Institut for Jewish History and Culture and professor at the History Department of the University of Leipzig. Diner is a full member of the Philological Historical class of the Saxony Academy of Sciences. Diner is also the board member and chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Alfred Landecker Foundation. I'm going to read something about Dan Diner's work, because he's mentioned a lot in these kind of texts. In his work, Dan Diner thematically links strands of European history with those of the Near and Middle East, as well as Jewish history with a universal historical intent. In so doing, Diner seeks to transcend spatial and cultural distinctions epistemologically by means of a peripheral perspective. Dan Diner's work is also known for methodological questions about the relationship between history and memory, especially concerning the period of National Socialism. Dan Diner coined the epistemic concept of the, quote, breakdown of civilization. Dan Diner's research is currently focused on two main topics: the conceptualization of modern Jewish history and a global memory history of the Second World War. The complex of Jewish history emerged from the research agenda of the Simon-Dubnow-Institut in Leipzig and is being implemented in the project European Traditions, Encyclopedia of Jewish Cultures, funded by the Union of Academics and based on the Saxon Academy of Sciences in Leipzig. As part of the ERC project, Judging History's Experience, Judgment, and Representation of World War II in an Age of Globalization, under his leadership as principal investigator, the ability of historical experiences in the Second World War to be universalized was investigated, primarily by comparing continental and colonial experiences of violence. Historical understanding and moral judgment are depicted against the background of a globalizing culture of memory. Dan Diner is considered to be the author who coined the German word narrative in the sense of a meaningful story. In his collection of essays, Cycles, National Socialism and Memory, he wrote in 1995, quote, "The mass extermination of European Jews was statistics, not a narrative," end quote. In 2021, Dan Diner's nonfiction book, Another War, Jewish Palestine and the Second World War, 1935 to 1942, was nominated by the Leipzig Book Fair for the Leipzig Book Fair Prize. Anyway. Back to the text. In the communist countries of Eastern Europe, Jews were not acknowledged as a distinct group of victims. Instead, communist and anti-fascist resistance fighters were the most important people to be memorialized. As a result of this delusion, adequate research of the Holocaust never took place. In addition, the GDR did not see any reason to normalize relations with Israel and rejected all claims for compensation by Holocaust survivors. After 1945, the continued existence of anti-Semitism, which was very much alive in a large part of the population, was never addressed or dealt with because, according to the ideology of Orthodox communism, the socialist nations were seen as the true winners of history, bringing progress to the world. Besides the historical context of the Cold War and the strong relations between the Soviet bloc and the Arab states, this ideology played a major role in explaining the undiluted ferocity of anti-Zionism and the enduring comparison and equation of Israel with Nazi Germany in the GDR. This was not a legitimate form of political criticism, but a fierce form of anti-Semitic anti-Zionism. To this day, this pernicious hatred of Israel deriving from the Orthodox communist ideology is alive and well in a large part of Die Linke. I wanted to look up the civilization breakdown thesis. The term, quote, break in civilization, unquote, coined by Dan Diner, provides an argumentative and semantic framework for an interpretation of the history of the 20th century for a range of questions that arise in the tense field between the Holocaust and memory. Going beyond an analysis of the Holocaust that understands the mass murder of European Jews from the perspective of perpetrators and victims, the term, quote, break in civilization places the historical events in a universal dimension that extends to the history of Western civilization and the history of modernity. This also gives memory a universal scope that extends beyond the memory cultures of the countries concerned. On the one hand, the term civilizational break expresses a, quote, anthropological irritation, end quote, Dan Diner, emanating from the victims, the foundations of social action in modern times, which are based on, quote, rational assumptions guiding action, end quote, and trust in the logic of human rationality based on self-interest, are no longer valid, quote, because people could be destroyed for the sake of mere destruction. The foundations of our civilization, which were anchored in our consciousness, were also profoundly shaken, indeed denied, end quote. Dan Diner. In addition, the term civilizational breakdown includes a reinterpretation of the Holocaust as an event of relevance to human history, and at the same time the tense relationship between the factuality of the event and the event's decades-long repression. The question of the reasons for this non-perception, as well as the now occurring recognition of the historical facts as a singular turning point, form the starting points for considerations of the history of collective memory and the perspectives of remembrance. Back to the text. New section, section 7, the anti-Zionism of the West German left. The other justification of hatred of Israel in Die Linke is to be found in the history of the radical left in West Germany. Its relations with Israel differs from those of the GDR. Until the Six-Day War, the majority of leftists in Germany had a pro-Israel attitude. However, the tremendous historical shift that followed this decisive war unleashed a fierce hatred of the Jewish state, which in turn became an integral part of the left's identity. This hatred has all the attributes of a pathological aversion. Israel was no longer regarded as a socialist experiment, with its kibbutzim and its egalitarian ethos, but as a country of oppressors, by no one less than the recent murderous persecutors of the Jews. It was henceforth referred to as a racist occupying power that deprived the Palestinians of their human rights in their national homeland. This hostility toward Israel can only be understood in the context of the widespread romanticization of revolution itself. Since Western democracies had given up on revolutions, and since the proletariat that was supposed to be the carrier of the revolutionary banner was ignorant of that proletariat's historical obligation, the longing for a revolution had to be transferred to the Third World. The ideology of tiers-mondism, third worldism I think is what that means, was on the rise, and the left began to support all kinds of national liberation movements in the Third World as a redirection activity, an alternative for what was missing under their very own noses. Some groups even supported the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, but the Palestinians became the object of solidarity. Their terror attacks were justified as the actions of an oppressed underdog fighting a powerful enemy. The Palestinians fitted neatly into the leftist cult of the noble guerrilla. Leftist radical groups like the Rota Army faction, Red Army faction, even received military training in Palestinian camps. Leftist West German groups went so far as to commit anti-Semitic crimes. On the 9th of November 1969, the 31st anniversary of the night of pogroms, Kristallnacht, of 1938, a group called Tupamaros West Berlin planted a bomb in front of the Jewish Community Center in Berlin and justified this attack as a necessary response to the so-called, quote, fascist, end quote, crimes of the Zionists and as an expression of solidarity with the fighting Fedayeen as the avant-garde of the worldwide revolution. Wikipedia says Fedayeen is an Arabic term used to refer to various military groups willing to sacrifice themselves for a larger campaign. Back to the text. New section. Section 8. Secondary Anti-Semitism. In addition to the above-mentioned explanations, it is obvious that neither East nor West Germany can be compared to other countries. When all is said and done, the fact remains that contemporary Germany is the successor to Nazi Germany. Thus, another feature has to be added to the leftist hostility toward Israel in order to explain this particular brand of anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. After 1945, the official expression of traditional anti-Semitism became taboo in both Germanys. Unofficially, however, anti-Semitism was expressed both overtly and covertly without restraint. In the following decades, the ever-present anti-Semitic resentment had to find a different venue to express itself. After the Holocaust, every Jew personified the crimes committed by Nazi Germany. Jews were perceived as an obstacle to the development of a national identity and a positive identification with Germany and Germany's history. Jews were seen as permanent accusers who perpetuated Germany's bad conscience and exploited German guilt by demanding reparations. This anti-Semitism is perfectly expressed in the following paradoxical statement: the Germans will never forgive the Jews for Auschwitz. This is how the journalist Henrik M. Broder put it. I don't know if I said footnote, but that's a footnote. See also Andrei S. Markovits, a new or perhaps revived, quote, uninhibitedness towards Jews in Germany, in Jewish Political Studies Review 2006. Wikipedia says Henrik Marcin Broder, born August 1946, self-designated Henrik Modest Broder, is a Polish-born German journalist, author, and television personality. Henrik M. Broder was born into a Jewish family in Katowice, Poland. Broder is especially interested in Vergangenheitsbewältigung, Islam, Israel, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Henrik M. Broder sees a close relationship between German criticism of Israel's policies and anti-Semitism. Back to the text. This bizarre twist and twisted thinking eventually resulted in the externalization of German guilt. Nazis were consequently seen everywhere, but most specifically in Israel. In due course, Jews were, and continue to be, accused of having learned nothing from the Holocaust and acting like Nazis. On the other hand, the Palestinians are regarded as the new Jews, the victims of the former victims. By demonizing and, quote, Nazifying Israel and opposing Israel's existence, German leftists are able to construct an anti-fascist continuity for themselves and fight the anti-fascist battle that their Nazi parents and grandparents never fought. The advantage of this secondary anti-Semitism to German leftists can be observed on an individual psychological level in West Germany as well as on a collective level in East Germany. The defamation of Israel as a fascist country and Zionism as a fascist ideology conveniently strengthens the anti-fascist self-deception. Because anti-Semitism was never recognized for the core evil that anti-Semitism was, and because fascism was merely seen as a different kind of capitalistic oppression, the Holocaust was not recognized as the worst genocide ever committed in the history of all humanity, and consequently lost its abominable horror. The most common example of a current manifestation of secondary anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. Although these ideologies are not identical, they overlap to a large extent. According to Leon Polyakov, Israel has become the Jew among the nations. It serves as the collective Jew. One moment. Wikipedia says Leon Polyakov was born in 1910 in St. Petersburg, Russia, and died December 8, 1997 in Orsay, France. Leon Polyakov was an important publicist and historian. Leon Polyakov was head of research at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris and considered a pioneer of Holocaust research. Back to the text. This anti-Semitic anti-Zionism is not exclusive to the German left, but expresses itself in Germany in a highly unadulterated form. New section. Section 9. Ignorance about ideology and the informal leftist jihadist alliance. Ignorance concerning the destructive power of ideology seems to be a particular blind spot of the leftist worldview. This critical blind spot is repeated in the leftist attitude toward Islamism. It is also evident in Die Linke and has grown in significance during the past few years. In previous decades, the German left supported various so-called national liberation movements, but mainly secular ones. It supported the PLO and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, but nowadays supports Hamas, a fanatically religious and oppressive organization. This development was recently labeled the leftist jihadist Querfront, or Cross Front, by the German journalist Ivo Bozik. I think Ivo Bozik is one of the original peoples of who started Jungle World. According to German Wikipedia, the term cross-front in the narrower sense refers to anti-democratic strategies in the Weimar Republic that attempted to combine the ideologies of nationalism and socialism in order to gain political power. Representatives of the conservative revolution had been striving for such alliances in theory since around 1920. And then the Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher had been striving for them in practice since 1932. In the broader sense, a cross-front refers to the cooperation of mixing left and right positions in order to increase support for anti-emancipatory positions and to create cross-camp action alliances, quote, across existing left and right political positions. Parts of German neo-Nazism as well as left-wing groups and parties with nationalist tendencies attempted to do this. Whether the historical term can be applied to any alliances of left and right political forces is controversial. It is therefore proposed that only cross-camp alliances with anti-emancipatory, quote, content overlaps, end quote, such as anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, Islamism, and anti-feminism should be referred to as cross-fronts. Extremism research also explains such alliances as being based on the consistent, quote, authoritarian dispositions, collectivist friend-enemy constructions, and conspiracy theoretical anti-Semitic explanations of the world, end quote, among right-wing and left-wing sections of the population. That quote is from Lars Rensman. Back to the text. Wait. Ivo Bozik. Nothing for him that I see coming up right away. Some parts of Die Linke openly proclaim their collaboration with radical Islamic groups against the United States and Israel. Asked how they could have cooperated with radical Islamic organizations and fascist groups, the parliamentarian members of Die Linke either claimed that they did not know who had organized the Gaza Freedom Flotilla or baldly denied that fascist or Islamist groups had indeed participated. Under a highly benign interpretation, one might consider such behavior naive. However, it is much more probable that these collaborators with radical Islamists know exactly what they are doing. A certain convergence of orthodox leftism and Islamist ideology is obvious. Both share an anti-imperialist ideology, a deep hatred of Israel and the United States, and a dystopian yearning for a simple, pre-modern world. Both ideologies also reject globalization and financial capital as a symbol of the exploitative capitalist society. Both tend to simplify the complexity of the modern world into a clear-cut, black and white paradigm without shades of gray. Both feel morally superior and self-righteous and delude themselves in thinking that they are fighting for a higher cause and that they are always on the side of the global underdog and the oppressed masses. At the global level, the leftist jihadist collaboration manifests itself in the alliance of Venezuela and Iran, the self-proclaimed socialist paradise of the 21st century, and the reactionary dictatorship of the mullahs. New section, Section 10. Die Linke cannot and must not be dismissed as an irrelevant radical fringe on the left of the German political spectrum. That would be the height of the height of irresponsibility, because Die Linke does not operate under the same political restrictions as the mainstream political parties. Die Linke often expresses widespread anger and hatred towards Israel more openly than those parties. The many examples of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionism involving politicians of all parties are shocking. But only parliamentary members of Die Linke could participate in the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and still be supported by their party leadership. In no other party is the left's ingrained hatred of Israel as rampant. In regard to Israel and the conflict in the Middle East, Die Linke may appear to be the avant-garde of German society. I hope that this is an overly pessimistic interpretation, and I would gladly be proven wrong in this regard. Still, I fear that my presumptions are not totally over the top. This is illustrated by the following incident that took place shortly after the incident involving the Mavi Marmara, namely when the German Secretary for Development, Dirk Niebel, was refused entry into the Gaza Strip by the Israeli authorities. Even though it is widely known that Israel prohibits official visits by foreign dignitaries to Gaza so as not to legitimize the Hamas government, the German Bundestag passed an unanimous resolution condemning Israel's actions, including the blockade of the Gaza Strip. Even conservative politicians, who are in general considered to be pro-Israel, praised Die Linke for its opposition to the blockade. This resolution serves as proof that all German political parties presented a united front against Israel. Needless to say, this new and alarming development undeniably strengthened Hamas. Finally, it is important to note that the debate within Die Linke is not yet over and done with. The organization's ultimate direction will be crucial for people on the left, not only in Germany, but also throughout Europe. That's the end of the piece. All right. Thank you so much for listening.